You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. And sometimes normal.
Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey, escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian, and tonight my guest is a returning champion. I have Vinny Marone from Jersey calling. He was on a few weeks ago, and towards the end of the interview, he started getting weird, like right into my lane. There's a little bit of aliens going on, some cryptids, so he's back to get deep. What's happening, man?
I am so thrilled to be doing this because we were just kind of talking about it off camera / audio that we don't get to really talk about this very often with others. So it was pretty awesome to be able to come across yourself and listen to your shows and understand that that you like to dive deep into this, man. So I'm stoked.
Right. Like everyone else is weird except for us. And you met another normal person. And now here you are. Right.
Right.
There's a lot of synchronicities happening here. You're drinking out of a Phillies cup. I'm wearing a Phillies 3/4 zip, whatever it is.
There you go.
This conversation's meant to be.
Here it is.
That's the old school logo. That's the Mickey Morandini logo there.
We can talk about whether or not the Phils are on a skid right now or not. I guess in another episode.
Yeah. It's tough doing super topical because then by the time this gets out and then people are like, oh man, I once tried to do. I had this guy, nice guy, and he has this Wave Pack clothing line. So he was on. We covered that, and so I just know him. We talked about basketball, so we got into the NBA playoffs. But then by the time it came out, we were completely wrong. And by the time it came out, it was over. And I was like, all right, chop half of that interview off. That's fine. We're geniuses.
I feel like that might be fun though to kind of put that out and here's what our predictions were, and here's how wrong we were.
That's why I do not give betting advice. I'm like, nobody listen to me on that. So that's it. Awesome, man. All right, let's dive deep. We can do some training wheels of how you got into it, or do you just want to go weird? What kind of itch are you trying to scratch?
I don't know, man. I guess, I feel like I'm also interested in how you got into it. So maybe we can kind of start off there and see where we both land on some of these insane topics that aren't so insane to me anymore now that I've been learning about it so much. But yeah, I'm stoked to hear about your journey too.
All right, I'll start off first. So I guess my dad believes in aliens. We were growing up. I was born in early 80s and everything, growing up all through that time. But he loved Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he was also very skeptical of JFK, the whole JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
So I started getting into that and the Loch Ness Monsters. Those three were my things. But I'm 7, 8 years old. This is my bread and butter here. Oh, there's a monster in Scotland. This is great. And I would read all the books and then come home and dinner table conversations. God bless my mom, that she was probably like, what is he doing? Look at me now, Ma, look at me now. What is happening? But we would get in the whole magic bullet theory stuff about Kennedy. And then when the Oliver Stone film came out, I took that as gospel, and I was I was just studying the documentary of the Oliver Stone movie. And looking back on it now, half that's bullshit. But the aliens, I'm
and to
Oswald.
left.
Yeah. The best is the Seinfeld Keith Hernandez episode. He got spit on and kept doing it.
Yes.
But Roswell and taking that as gospel. And then I kind of go back and forth. Kennedy, all that stuff's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Warren report that it's bullshit. You read it and we just moved it over 4.5 inches. But 4.5 inches is a shot in the shoulder to the back of the middle of your neck. That's not just a rounding error or a math correction. That's not that's completely a different wound.
Oh yeah.
you know. And then you hear like some other people, there's some crazy podcast of like what happened, like episodes that come out of like what happened. And it was really just this like movie prop thing on the side of his face. And that's why you kind of see it roll up. But then you're listening to it, you're like, well, that's bullshit. And you go and you watch the Zapruder film and you're like, yeah, like his face kind of does roll up. Like, that's fucking weird. But then he like dived under the bottom of the car to roll into the trunk. And then he lived off into the, Onasis's island that he owned, and then Jackie ended up marrying Onasis, like really crazy stuff. But you're like, hey man, like the further we get into this world, I'm like, maybe that did happen. I don't know. But I think he died. I think all that stuff, and he was killed by the government.
Yeah.
But the UFOs, it was always like, oh, they're coming from, middle of outer space, then coming here. Like the further this goes on, man, like I don't think so anymore. Like
It could be right next to us right now.
So they could be next to us right now. They could be just cloaked. They could be perceiving our time differently than we do. And the whole fourth dimension, I don't know if we touched on this in our music episode or not, but there's this Carl Sagan interview, and he's trying to describe what the fourth dimension is and how if like, we only live in we perceive in a three-dimensional world, but like we're 2D at the same time. And to explain a 4D thing, it's that, to see a cube, you'd actually be seeing inside the cube and all the cube at the same time. So if it was passing through our reality, we could see something. I barely a slippery grip on that concept.
Yeah.
I cannot understand like what that world would look like. I'm stuck on the like, hey, we have to eat McDonald's and we have to have a Coke to drink and survive. And, we have to clock in our job and do all these things. And I push that in that fourth dimensional world. And maybe they need none of this, but also just standing in open space for your entire existence seems really strange to me. It seems like you have to have a home to go to or a rock to crawl on, whatever these things are. So I have a hard time.
There's got to be like
that.
a point where you're based out of or working from. I think about that sometimes when I think about like UFO sightings and the different orbs and stuff, and how that idea of they're kind of in one stationary place somewhere on the fabric of space-time, and they're pulling us to them so that they could view it. And what we're seeing is what we're able to see from our third dimensional existence, but that they're stationary somewhere else. But then you have to think, well, where is that stationary place? Is it a place at all, kind of thing? It's like it starts blowing your mind a little bit.
It is hard to wrap your head around it. Did you happen to listen to the Terrence Howard interview on Rogan?
Yeah, so I listened to some clips of it. He loses me when he says like 1 times 1 is 2.
I would say that was the worst part of the episode, because I was like, I'm not quite getting that. It's like 1 times 1's not 1. It's like 2, because you can't have 1 time. It's like I get there's something you're trying to say. We're missing that, but he was
all over the place, man. And I'm not saying that, I want to learn more about him and what he's what his background is, what he's gone through. I like that there's people that wouldn't normally be interested in the subject. They're turning their attention to it because he's a celebrity figure, and just from a salacious point of view of it, like he could be just this nut job ex actor who's got sour grapes, so that's going to turn attention to it. But what if he's not? What if he actually has some credibility to what the things he's saying? Now he's got the attention of people, and maybe he's got some really valuable things to say. So
right, so like the Limitless movie, like he takes the pill and you're able to recall every piece of evidence you ever had and piece it together in some like sound story. And it's like, all right, are these acting things that he learned or that he's had and he's applied to acting, and you just give him the script once. He's like, oh, I'm good to go. I know all the lines, like photographic memory. But he was rattling things off and he was trying to explain it. He was trying to explain it in layman's terms. Some of the stuff like way over my head. But so I interviewed one guy and we talked about the Bob Lazar element 115. And this guy had some like direct knowledge of UFOs, but half the stuff ends up being, like, hey man, I heard a story. Like, tell me the story you heard. And I like this where we'll talk about our personal stuff, like how we feel about it. But so I brought up element 115. I was like, oh, well, Bob Lazar. And the guy was like, no, like they know what's missing from the periodic table. They just haven't found it yet. Like 115 has a place marker, like that element. They just need to go find it. And I was like, oh, like, what does that mean? So Terrence Howard in his interview, he was like, oh, the periodic table's flat and we view things in like straight and rectangular and all these lines, and you look at it as a table. And my, like, I don't know a lot about science, but helium, like I assumed you found it like on the beach, like a seashell, and you're like, oh, here's helium. Let me add this to my collection because it's a brand new. Here's oxygen. Here's gold. And he's like, no, it's actually like turned and it's a twisted rag. And like as you go up, and if you're multiplying or doubling the certain elements, you come to a new element. So as he was saying that, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense on how you would know element 115 would be there because you just haven't doubled that one element to be like, well, I just need to find this in the real world, but it should exist here.
Right.
It was fascinating stuff. And the one thing that I really liked about him, I swear I'll let you talk at some point, but I
No,
like
it's all
that he
good.
brought up, I like that he brought up, he's like, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I'm like, okay, well, that makes perfect sense and everything. You hit the cue ball, playing pool, hit the 8 ball, the cue ball sticks, another one goes. And he was talking about, he didn't know about aliens or whatever, but he also has like 92 patents, and I have these like cubes that can like, they're going to go all over the place. But he's like, what you can't do is like, you can't really leave the Earth's atmosphere. It takes too much energy. You'll never have all that energy to do it. So he's like, so the Earth has a harmonic resonance. And if you can find the opposite of it, you can just disassociate from that resonance, and then the Earth will fly you by. And then if you can find that resonance of the solar system and then of the galaxy, now you're not really time traveling. You just stop moving as everything else is moving, and then you're going to jump back in. Like it's some type of like the light speed in Star Wars, but like without you having to move. I was like, that kind of makes sense. I don't know how you get that like directionally or anything, like how you would catch up. I guess then at that point you'd be like, well, I'm going to be like at the sun, but then like 3 minutes behind, and then you'd end up at the Earth. Like if the aliens were traveling, I get leaving. Like if you just stand there and a car drives away, but how do you ever get ahead of the car? Type of thing. Like that wouldn't really work. I
Yeah,
think.
no, well, I think that like what he's talking about there, I've delved a little bit into that, like the idea of harmonics with frequencies. Like Nikola Tesla did a lot of stuff in regards to that in our contemporary lifetimes. And then there's theories and the hypotheses that like, the ancient Egyptians or maybe the pre-dynastic Egyptians knew about this, and that's how they were able to do things like, move stone, large, geographical spaces and things like that. So I get the idea of it. I think it's like tuning into a frequency, and then you're able to not only manipulate the space, but also the time in it as well. So like you said, like 3 minutes behind, but you're at the sun instead of the Earth. Like that whole idea. I remember watching The Time Machine, the most recent version of it. I guess it was like Guy Pearce was the lead in that one.
I
And
vaguely remember seeing it.
yeah, his idea of the time machine was kind of like that, where he figured out how to remain in regards to space time. He figured out how to remain in the same space but allow time to move around that one space by honing into a certain frequency. So yeah, it's crazy stuff, man. Like the idea of like the solar system or the universe or an individual galaxy all has its own resonance and frequency, and you can tune into it, or you can tune to the opposite of it and have some crazy stuff happen.
Yeah, it's wild. But like as he's saying it, I'm like, that makes a lot more sense than the other stuff that like I can't wrap my head around. Or like, oh, 6 trillion light years away, what we detected. I'm like, how did you detect that? Like
Right.
like I feel like we would have parades every day for this amazing technology that you were like, we can detect this from a gajillion miles away. But instead you're like, we can't just take their word for it. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, actually the star that it passed had like a trillionth of a second blip, a nanosecond of a blip, and that's how we know there's a planet there. I'm like, that kind of sounds like bullshit, man. It's like my
Yeah.
kid tells me comes from school, and I'm like, none of that's real, man. But again, maybe this is like so high tech that I'm like, oh, I'm the dumb one here. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying with that too, because I think a lot of the things that we take as, rock solid fact, it really is just a lot of like theory, and it's a lot of theorems and hypotheses, and oh, well, we've detected an Earth-like planet around, a star 40 light years from here. I think that was like the most recent one that came out, and it's just like, well, how do you know? Like, did you send? I mean, I guess they could have sent something at this point. They could have sent something there for 40 years and gotten there and confirmed it, but that's not what they're implying. They're implying that they were like these mathematical equations deduced that this is there. So
Right,
what
they
does that
found
really
one
mean?
planet that was all made out of diamonds. I'm like, you don't know that, but like they come out and like, where was that? And they had the Voyager, I guess, is like the furthest thing in the solar system.
Hmm.
And I think sometime last month or in May that they reprogrammed it and came back and it was talking again. But it's like, but if it took 60 years to get out there, how did your code shoot out there to like re-up? Like, wouldn't you have had to tell me this in 1980? Like, hey guys, with this idea that probably in the year, 2020, it's going to crap out. We're going to lose contact. So we just sent this thing that, like, we sent a patch. Like that would make, but instead they're just like, oh no, we just did this. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, how did, I don't know.
So
Technology got better, except for going to the moon. That's the only thing that's like went backwards ever since it got invented.
yeah, see, that's another that's another one. It kind of blows my mind. The mainstream excuse for that is that all of that technology was seized by the FBI after the Apollo missions. And that's why the scientists had to start from scratch. And that's why they don't know how to get to the moon again. And I get the idea, like you can't just like shoot off a rocket and fire it and aim it directly at the moon and get there. It's not how it works. You have to kind of go around different, you have to depend on the orbit of the Earth and the orbit of the moon, and you have to kind of slingshot your way there. So I get all of that, but I just feel like those types of stories and excuses are nothing but horseshit.
You can ask ChatGPT anything right now. It'll give, I mean, it could be truth or complete bullshit. There's attorneys filing cases based off ChatGPT where it makes up a case and that doesn't work out too well for the attorneys.
Yeah.
But it seems like over the last, 1969 to now, 55 years, right? So 55 years, somebody else using, they used Abacus and the basic calculator and a fucking iPhone here that can, make a nuclear bomb. You guys can't figure out, if you got there the first time, it couldn't have been that hard in the 10-year period that you tried. And now with how intelligent we are and how much better rockets and everything else, and we're already at the space station's already there. So just base your calculations off all these things like that. Like, no, we just can't do it. Oh, we just had the new rover land on the moon. We couldn't have it live stream because there was a glitch, but don't worry about it. But then it crashed and fell over 10 seconds after it was up there. But we have one shitty ass picture. And you understand because the quality of the camera is so good that it's compressed that we can't uncompress it to make it look better. So it actually looks worse than it did in 1969. And people are like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Like that's not real.
So that in and of itself, there we go. That's a good jumping off point. So the idea of, did we go to the moon in 1969? Did we land there? Did we continue going throughout the 70s? Did we not? And then, what does that look like? If we did, why can't we get back up there? Is it because we're being stopped from going up there? Is it because there's something else up there that doesn't want us there? All those kinds of crazy rabbit holes that you can go down.
What do you think about the space station? This is not your interview, man. Start your own podcast. What do you think?
What do I think? I subscribe to the idea that there's stuff up there that's that our folks actually uncovered. There's enough astronauts on record saying that they ran into something up there, and they don't say what it is. They don't confirm that it's not of this world or anything like that, but just from what's inferred, there was a presence up there, whether they were ships or, drones or whatever it was, and they did not feel welcome up there. And that's why we haven't been back all this time.
Yeah, I go back and forth if we actually land there. For myself, I am 100% certain that footage is bullshit. That footage was filmed in the United States, or that film was filmed on Earth. That Kubrick, maybe he did, maybe didn't have something to do with it. They filmed on Earth, and it was a time of nationalism. We had to beat the Ruskies. We had to get up there, and whoever got there first and be the greatest nation in the world. And there's the Cold War. There's all these things going on. And if we sent Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and that third guy should have walked on the moon, we would always know his name off the tip of our tongue. But sorry, bud, you stayed in the capsule. If the three of them went up there and they died, they crashed immediately. That footage would have came out of them walking on the moon and have been hunky-dory and, 1969, rah, rah, rah. They came back. They were some of the miserablest looking people in the, dude, I hit a winning shot in beer pong. You're not going to hear the end of it all night. Doesn't mean shit. I am gloating. You don't know how long you're going to be at the top four. My mouth is running. I'm having the best time, the greatest time. Those guys were on the moon. Two people that we know of at that time had ever walked on the moon, and they came down. And Buzz Aldrin, he kind of opened up later in life, but they have a press conference where three of them look freaking miserable. Yeah. Now, maybe that's some of that's like a PTSD of like how small we are in the universe. Once you're up there and you look at Earth and you're like, why are they so mean to each other? And from here it's so beautiful. Like, I don't know, but also kind of seems like I'd like, oh my God, I was on, guys, let me tell you about the time I was on the moon. Like, oh my God, Brian's here again. He's not telling me about the time he was on the moon. Hey, Vinny, you ever been on the moon, man? Oh, no, let me tell you. All right, so the time that I was on the moon, like every single party I ever went to would be about that. And
Yes.
they didn't. Neil Armstrong never came out again and like really talked about it. Like that's weird to me.
Yeah, he was as reclusive as you can possibly be, being pretty much the most famous man in the world, right? He went there because, and then you gotta ask yourself the question, did they act like that because they ran into something while they were up there and they couldn't talk about it? Or did they act like that because they were being, put on the spot as these guys that did this incredible thing and they didn't really do that incredible thing? So there's like a couple different ways that you can look at it. But the idea I like about this whole thing, like our conversation, the conversations that you have with other people, is just the idea of talking about it. That you take this narrative that's been fed to us all this time and you question it. You question authority, you think for yourself, you come to your own conclusions. That doesn't happen very much anymore. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to things like this, because it's one of the few things that's left that we're able to kind of like fantasize about or to have a different opinion about. And there's no way for me to prove it. There's no way for you to prove it. And in reality, there's really no way for the authorities to prove their side either, because their proof is, certifiable bullshit. Like you can debunk pretty much everything that they say. Like you mentioned, the idea of the footage and the photos being bullshit. It is. I mean, they've come out and said it as much. It's like, oh yeah, well we doctored these photos, but we promised we didn't doctor these other ones. It's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, how are we supposed to know for sure that it wasn't all of them or it was none of it? You know what I mean? Like, so it's like if there's a lie at the root of this whole thing, why are you lying about it? And you mentioned a bunch of the reasons why they could have lied about it. Nationalism at the time, Cold War. If you want to get woo woo about it, it could be because we ran into aliens or whatever it is. Whatever the reason was, there was a lie at the root of it.
But they haven't come out and said any of that is like still the problem. Like if there were aliens there and like, hey guys, look, we get it. Like we were on board. Even just say the footage is fake because the pictures and the footage, like there's shadows that are crossing over each other. That cannot happen if it was one independent sun light source. You don't have that on the Earth. You stand outside with your buddy, you stand next to a car, you stand next to a house, all the shadows point in one direction. And you can look at not any of them, but you can look at many of the moon photos and the lander's shadows going one way, and then the astronaut shadows going the other way, and then a rock shadows going a third way, and none of that would happen. And they're like, oh, well, the moon is so super reflective that it's actually causing these shadows. But well, if it's so bright, would there be a shadow at all? Like,
Right.
like if it's pointing up at you, wouldn't, I don't know. Again, but you get told things, you don't want to rock the boat, and then some of these people are so smart and they go, to great institutions, they get, Harvard and all these things, and you get told you're smart. And part of that is like fitting in while also like fitting out by being so smart. And then you start questioning these things that like look obviously, but also like, what does it change? For some of these people, now you're seeing a lot of people coming out, and just questioning some like basic narratives. We can go down like multiple rabbit holes if you want, but so let's just about UFOs just in general. That for a long time it was like, oh, there's the swamp gas. Oh, it's just swamp gas. Oh, it's a headlight from over here on this bridge. You're like, oh, that bridge from 40 miles away on a curved Earth. You wouldn't, but okay, okay, sure,
Right.
but having. So what got you into aliens or into these topics? As at what point did you get into them?
Yeah, well, I think much like yourself, like, just kind of like hearing the stories and it just really sparking my imagination. I didn't watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind until I was much older, but I watched E.T., that was another one of his movies, and that really grabbed me as a kid, and just the idea of this creature that could come from somewhere else, that always fascinated me. I don't know. I think a lot of it too, I grew up Catholic. And I don't know what it was. I don't think I was kind of like pushed one way or the other. Well, yeah, I was pushed one way for sure. I was being indoctrinated. But I don't know what made me question all of that when I was younger, but I did almost immediately. And like my furthest memories back is like, why am I doing this? This is not real, that kind of thing. And that's another whole other topic that we can talk about. But just the idea of just questioning. things. And I remember listening to a Tool record one day, and there's that recording that comes over. It's like, think for yourself, question authority, and it repeats itself over and over. And that was something that really stuck with me. So why aliens? Why things like ancient Egypt? I don't know. They just they spark my imagination, man. Just the idea that there's no way that we're the only creatures, in this universe. There's just no way. There's no way that we're the only consciousness in this world. I was talking to my wife about it just either earlier today or yesterday. We were talking about the birds that are outside and how they communicate with one another. And, people will argue that they're not conscious beings, but they are. They have their own sentience and consciousness that we can't understand. Is it rudimentary compared to ours? Maybe, but it's still there. So if there's that level and we're here, there's got to be something up here. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what fascinates me about it all.
They're just in this like tripped out DMT thing of like their heads exploding of consciousness, and that's why they can't really. They'll fly a little bit and then land. And look at those dumb little things. And they're like, you don't understand. I'm tripping balls right now. This is crazy. You guys should be here.
Dude,
But
I hear about that all the time. Like, I guess that's one of the buzz things that, like, the buzz topics is like the whole DMT trips and how, you know, rearranging the way your synapses fire under that kind of stuff could let you tune into these different types of reality, these different dimensions. I don't know how much I believe in all of that, but it's definitely cool to think about.
yeah, I feel like I'm too old to begin any of these journeys. And hey, you're never too old to do anything. But like, I've got a family, I've got kids,
Right.
I've got a job I'm trying to keep. DMT, I don't know really how much I feel about that, but stuff like
Right.
ayahuasca, where it could like heal like traumas I have, man, you don't understand, but like, but heal some like just some bullshit, whatever, like everybody has. And if I could like fire off better in my head of like, hey, we're all one people and we're all like better and like don't be mad at like the guy who cut you off and things like that. Like I would live a better existence.
Yeah.
But I also
Yeah.
don't want
Tripping balls on DMT is not going to pay the mortgage. That's for sure.
right, yeah. Or you have the bad trip or whatever it is, like, oh, bro, he used to be a good guy, but now he's a fucking nut. And he's just like talking to the birds. You know? But you
I
never know.
swear they're
It's
conscious, man.
right. You just don't know. But like just the whole stuff, like even from when I was a little kid, like talking about Egypt, like I all the time, I was like, that's not real. Like that did not happen the way that you said it did. You're talking about, no, I get that, there's we're closer to the time of Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the time of the Egyptians, the
Yeah,
mainstream
like
narrative of the Egyptians
the first
building it.
dynasty. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, well, that's kind of hard to wrap my head around. But, so we're talking about Catholicism. I grew up in the same type of household. And you're like, all right, so Egypt is 5,000 BC and, we're in 2000 AD. And, so the time to Jesus to then, yeah, where's a 3,000 year difference. Like, how do we get dumber in that time? Like,
Yeah.
you're building these things and moving these things, and there's no great cataclysm that's talked about from 5,000 BC. Like, oh no, they just stopped doing that, and then we evolved into like these other things. And but like, if it was such a lush tropical area where you just grow your fruits and vegetables to feed all this stuff, and you hear this stuff from Graham Hancock and from Johnny Anthony West and from Randall Carlson and stuff like this, who are like telling you the truth of what that place was like then, this Garden of Eden type of like place, and even like the time of Jesus. All right, I've never been into the Middle East there, but hey, we went to Iraq and all this stuff, like pretty shitty, Egypt, again, maybe not shitty, sorry, but like, pretty deserty,
Right.
not great to sustain
Arid.
life on its
It was
own.
an
Arid, there you go.
arid
Thank you,
climate.
sir.
There you go.
Yeah. But, all of these biblical sites that people lived at, and oh, Jesus went to the gardens, and then he had an apple, and then he talked to this person, all this stuff, and yeah, sure, there's some orchards and different places, but in general, it's like most of this is inhabitable. Like,
Yeah.
where are you people living at that? So something had to have happened, and even that's not our narrative that's recognized. I find it just crazy.
Yeah, you brought up a few guys that I've really dove deep into what they've studied and what they've presented as far as evidence. And Randall Carlson especially, that dude is just like next level brilliant. And the amount of evidence that he takes to the table, and he doesn't even get into like the woo-woo type stuff, the aliens, the this and that. He's just saying, look, guys, this stuff happened. Here's the evidence. You can see the striations in the land and how like a wave would wash over land and go back into the sea and what that would look like. It happened on a macro scale. It wasn't like when you go down to the Jersey Shore and you see those little striations in the sand. it literally stretched across an entire continent, because there was a catastrophe that happened that rose the waters and then they receded back. So it's like those are the types of things that, mainstream scientists, they don't subscribe to. And why? Well, because there's a whole industry behind it. There's all those reputations that you brought up earlier. They built their academic career around one type of theory and they have to be right, because if not, then they don't have a career anymore. So just the idea that all of these new pieces of evidence are coming to light, it's reaching more people because of the internet, because of social media. I think it's important for us to kind of like start looking inward and taking stock and saying like, okay, maybe we'll never convince, Bob across the street that an alien is real, but we should at least look at this evidence that's there and say, okay, the stuff in the textbooks when we were kids, probably not correct. We should probably look at what, might have happened or was more likely to have happened, because you can never, I guess, really prove anything. We weren't there 7,000 years ago, but to really look at the evidence and see how it happened that way. I think that stuff is really, really interesting. There's a guy, it's Uncharted X is the name of the channel, and he does amazing work. And his first name is Ben. I can't remember his last name. But if you ever want to check out some technical stuff, evidence of, I think John Anthony West is like one of the guys that he studies. He talks about how a lot of the stuff in Egypt had to have been machined. There's no way that it was just cut with a bronze saw, that there were, higher levels of technology used to create these incredible monuments, and just incredible, not even monuments, but like just the infrastructure. There's an infrastructure of Egypt that nobody talks about, like the underground tunnels and network, and the shafts system that's underneath the Giza Plateau is like this whole crazy thing that people just think, oh, they're holes. No, they're not. Like there's a whole system to it. It's fascinating stuff.
Right. They talk about they used water and they were cutting with water. And if you use, I forget what other type of stone they were using. And, in 36 hours, you can cut a hole in a block of granite. Like, okay, if there was one, like, yeah, all right, that's fine. But there's hundreds and there's thousands and there's blocks. And it's like, how long did this take? What's going on with that? So there's this guy on Twitter. He goes by Anxiety, ANXE, like it's just spelled like the worst way possible. But he does tours in Egypt. And the one time he had like 20 minutes and he was like, oh, ask me anything. And so I just popped out. I was like, hey, like, they ever did any LiDAR or anything over in Egypt? So you can scan from they found whole cities in the Amazon and stuff like this. You can see through, you can see through trees. You can see under the ground a little bit. And he's just like, there are thousands. They did it, and there's thousands of sites. And he's like, but it's all locked up. He's like, you get small approvals to do it. And even like the Göbekli Tepe, this 11,000-year-old intentionally buried site, that has this technology of, they're carving glyphs into it. They actually carve the glyph out. They're not even carving into it. They carve everything else out and leave, this bird, all this other stuff. And they're like, oh no, this isn't going to be completely excavated for 200 years. We want to save stuff for the future. It's like, we want to save stuff for the future so you can control the narrative.
Yep. I guess maybe they're slow leaking things that keep people wanting to go there. But yeah, there's definitely something crazy going on with Egypt. And I don't want to talk too much smack because, you never know. But there's definitely stuff with the inner workings of the way that they roll things out within the, the Department of Antiquities, I think is what it's called. I think I can verbally bash them in public and not have a warrant out for my arrest. But
just stay in the United States and you're fine. And your world tour happened. Guys, I can't go. I can't go to the Middle East.
They won't let me go to Egypt. And you know what? To the contrary, I would. That is one of my dream spots that I want to go to. I want to go to Egypt, and I just want to be there. I don't want to. I'm sure I'll take photos when I'm there and all that stuff, but I don't want to even like go to take photos. I just want to be there. I want to feel it. I want to see why I'm so captivated by it, because I really believe that it's a place where a lot of energy is still stored to this day. And what that means, it just means, whether it means that the Great Pyramid was a power plant, or if there were like some crazy next level, alchemy type things going on, to create their civilization. I don't know exactly what it means, but there's definitely an aura there, an energy there that I am drawn to, and I want to go and experience it for myself and kind of put my, finger on the pulse of exactly what that might be, you know.
Right. I would be very interested to know like what the pyramids like one like where are the plans, like where are the drawing plans for it, and like how did they understand that, because it's more than just the king's chamber, the king's tomb, that nobody was ever found buried there, you know.
Hmm.
And you didn't spend all this time, it would have been constructed before the king was born to even finish it, so how do you even know that person's as important,
Right.
and so like it had to be for something more. So was it this free energy type of thing, was it this you know galaxy energy thing, was it to send radio beams, whatever type of beams they were, off to the alien somewhere else, and their sky brothers, whatever it is. I am interested, like if it was a power plant, like what did that mean? Were they running lines out of it and underground cables, or was this just that it's just the free energy of Tesla and you're able to pick things up by tapping into that? I just find all that so fascinating, and I feel like you'll hear crazy stories. I don't know how crazy. I'll say the crazy stuff and you can jump in or not. So they'll have people who create free energy, who can run cars on water, who can run cars on on just hydrogen, whatever it might be, and they die, or the
Yeah.
stuff seized, or it's national security. So one of the I've done almost no research on this, but there was a shooting at a grocery store in Albany, and there was a security guard there, and that man was killed. And there's sometimes in these incidents, I don't know if it was this one specifically, there's like some like weird calling cards left. There's like a random shoe. There's like, and like you start matching these across all of these other, tragedies like this. And you're like, well, that's kind of also weird that like it's always like a red Nike that's left, just like it's always the right foot, like very strange stuff. You start getting into like the $4 billion fine that Alex Jones has. So not going to go too far down there, but just some strange stuff. So, but this cop who was killed, and he was like off duty, who worked security for there sometime, and he happened to be there and he died. So he had his whole YouTube channel, and he was converting his car's engines to run on water. So, this very quote, this dumb guy, this dumb cop, all he does is just he's a cop. No, he is a mechanic in his off hours of enjoying things and figuring out how to turn a diesel engine into a water engine. Like, what would
Yes.
that do for the whole world? That if this one guy, maybe just decided that college wasn't for him or whatever it was, or he got interested in it later, I don't know what his background was, but this one guy, who I'm sure he could teach it to people like me, like you, Danny, to his neighbor, and all of a sudden you're not paying $4 for gasoline anymore. Like, what would that do to the whole system? And it just happens to be there's always interesting people. Everyone's interesting. There's always interesting stories tied to the people that die.
Well, yeah. So that whole idea of disrupting the world economy, disrupting the way of our contemporary society, I think that that's real. I think that like a guy like that mysteriously dies, I believe 1000% that it's a hit. Whether or not it's the government, or it could very well just be the conglomerate of oil companies who have their own little quote unquote government that they go out. It's no different than the mafia, right? So it's like, the mafia was more localized, like they had their little local branches in different metropolitan cities, and then they would all get together and kind of run things throughout, like a national level. But like if you think about it, corporations today, they run things very much like the mafia did back in the day when they were in power, except now they have the law on their side. Back in the early 2000s, there was so much legislation that passed that absolved guilt for individuals as long as the corporation absorbed the impact of whatever it was that happened. And you can just like use Enron as an example of that. But these people who make money hand over fist, billions of dollars, can walk away scot free after committing war crimes. You know what I mean? Like literal war crimes because of those laws, the legislation that was passed that protected the corporation. So it doesn't surprise me in the least bit that these big corporations would find out that there's this guy on YouTube that's jeopardizing their stream of business, right? And they say, okay, this guy's a problem. Let's get the problem solver out there. It sounds like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction or something, but it's the truth. I believe 1000% that that's real. Like, no doubt.
Right. So there's the Nicolas Cage movie, Lord of War, and then even Tony Stark, as
Mhm.
Iron Man, and he's just selling weapons all around the world. And he's like, I just sell the highest bidder, man. Like, I don't even care. Like, it's not even, it's all contrived or whatever anyway. And they just happen to bomb some sorry place that people were born into, and they just shoot all their weapons and get more. It's very sad for that. But it's funny. You're like, oh, maybe it's like the corporate. It's not they as the government. It's the corporation who just donates to our government to keep them in control. And it's like, hey, a CNN report sponsored by Pfizer about Pfizer to talk about the Pfizer jabs to find out the Pfizer jabs are. It's like, how did that actually all work?
Yep.
But very it's sad, man. When you get down to like stuff like that, it's like no one's going to get to the truth for anything. We're stuck in this like terrible two-party political system. You have
Yeah.
RFK Jr. coming out running as a third party. I'm not even asking like, how you're leaning for any of this stuff, but it's just like your choices are like bad, worse, and terrible. And then you're looking at it and you're like, well, you know, oh, RFK, he's gonna buck the system. And like, all right, well, they already changed like all the laws that after oh, fuck, who ran the 90s?
Clinton,
No, yeah, who's the
Bush.
third independent party?
Oh, you're talking about like Ross Perot?
Oh yeah, so all right, so they bucked the system with Ross Perot because he would buy time and he would sit here and break down how the entire government and then the spending and all this like interest stuff would work. And it was like blowing people's minds. Like, well, hold on, that's how money works. And they're like, well, actually, now you have to poll at 5% and like these polls that we control. And they're like, oh, sorry, man, you're 4.5%. Hey, RFK, sorry, 4.5%. Yeah, no Secret Service stuff for you. Go pick like
Mhm.
the worst person as a vice president that's not even progressive and it's like actually worse than like the restrictive that a lot of people don't seem to like. We're just stuck with this shit. And people like you can't even get out of it. It's like this is like kind of my UFO problem. I'm sorry, I'm over the place here. It's kind of my UFO
No, it's all
problem.
good.
So did we recover according to David Grush to Bob Lazar, we recovered UFOs. We recovered the vehicles, right? And Bob Lazar is trying to reverse engineer stuff. David Grush said we did. We got some bodies. But some of it went off to like private companies. So now you're stuck with like the Lockheeds might be doing some of this research. You go to FOIA and then you can't get it. You also have to know the keywords. And a funny thing came out today. I saw the Anthony Fauci thing. They're trying to find him his gain of function, all this stuff. But through a personal email that was leaked, it said, hey, misspell these words. So when they go to FOIA, they don't get it.
Yep.
So, just misspell a basic word and you ask for UFO, but they want to start calling it UOF. Hey, call it UOF. Well, know it is. And, just quick little typo. Oh, give me everything on UFO. Yep, no, zip zero. Now the UAPs, and that's like the new thing that the public guaranteed there's another term going on in the private government world that's like only use this. So when they go to FOIA, we're going to give them all the bullshit in the news. Hey, I saw the report on Fox News about a UAP. Things pretty interesting. You read this, Bob, and they're going to get it and look and be like, oh, okay, that's all we have about it. Just complete bullshit. So, but they're not going to ever tell us because how are the UFOs going? Oh, the Nimitz. Oh, it was up there waiting for us. Oh, just up there for weeks. It was just waiting. It knew where we were. And then it was where we were going in a heartbeat before we even knew where we were going. We didn't even get the orders to make a left, and it already made a left before we did to meet us there. That's free energy, man. So we have the stuff. We reverse engineered it, and here I am paying like $400 a month at PSE&G.
Oh yeah.
Tesla
Well,
was on his way. Oh, he's in love with a pigeon. He's insane. What are you talking about?
no, the thing with Tesla, I mean, that in and of itself, they didn't even bother hiding what happened to that poor man. They they ran that poor man through the ringer. I mean, you just look at the photos of him, when in his later years. I mean, he was a shell of himself. And then when he died, they literally went in and robbed him. Like, and admittedly so. They're like, oh yeah, we went in and we took the only thing that they say that they did wrong is they mischaracterize how many crates of things they took from him. They don't deny the fact that they robbed the poor guy after he died. They just, oh, it wasn't 7, it was 12 or whatever, or vice versa.
And
No,
he was
man,
working
it's
on developing energy and for I think JP Morgan, right? And then he was like halfway done. And he was like, great, how do we charge for this? He's like, what charge? Like, what are you talking about? I'm gonna turn it on in a minute. Everyone's gonna have it. He's like, no, no, no.
right.
Go back to that Edison guy, man. Like your stuff's bullshit.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly it, man. It's just like you know, here's another thing that kind of got me into the idea of it, like the idea of a new world order, right? So I don't think it's so new. I think it's existed for quite a long time. I always I always point to the transition between Eisenhower to Kennedy as the turning point of the America that our parents, like our parents' generation, thought that we lived in all these years, and we really haven't since that time. because the great old US of A hasn't always been so great anyway. If you if you go back even deeper in history, like just during the times of the way that they oppressed the indigenous cultures in this country and things like that. But even that besides the point, like if you want to start at the idea of like the nuclear family, the great American dream and all that stuff, I feel like whatever that was, if it existed at all, it ended in the transition from Eisenhower to Kennedy. Because at that point in time, whatever the catalyst was, and I have my own ideas on what that catalyst was, but whatever that was, we went from a, semi-democratic government to being controlled by, for layman's terms, a new world order, an order where it was a world type government that all, they work together, even though they might have their own interests, like other countries across the world are going to have different interests than we have here, but they all work together in a way to keep the general population, and I don't want to use this word out of turn, but to keep us in a way enslaved, to them, to their greater good. And I mean that in the sense that we're never really working for ourselves. We're always working to benefit them no matter what, no matter what our dreams are. It's nothing compared to what, their overall idea of success is. So that's another thing that fascinates me about it all.
So it's funny. I grew up, you know, we made our way up to middle class. That was like pretty good as I got older. And I guess there's the consumerism that was like pushed upon you. Or just like the 80s and the 90s and everything. But I want the big TV, and if the big 1,000-pound TV that made in your basement, you can never move it again. Like that was living. And like, oh, when I get I'm gonna have like 3 TVs. I'm gonna have whatever car I want. I want a Lamborghini. And as I get older, and I'm looking back in like the 1800s, hey, maybe you stepped on a nail and you died of dysentery or whatever it might have been. Not so great. But it's like, oh, just your own little piece of land. A river flowing nearby. You kind of farm. You've got your family. You teaching your kids, or maybe they go to the local schoolhouse with only 10 people. Like, was that so bad? Like, did we really, like, as I get older, I'm looking back at this like Little House on the Prairie type of thing. And it's like, shit, man, like they had to figure it out. And like, we went too far the other way. Hey, it's great. You call Uber and they take you to the bar or whatever it might be, or, you've got Jimmy John's delivering crap, or whoever it is. But as you get older, you're kind of like, shit, man, like we really had chances to fix things or do things the right way. Eisenhower, on his way out of his office, he has this famous speech where he talks about, I forget the exact term that he used.
The military industrial
complex. Yep, military industrial complex taken over. And if you guys understand what this means now, you're in a world of hurt. Nobody understood what he was talking about. The guy's like, oh, I guess it's kind of crazy. Just sad that he's leaving. Bring in JFK. JFK is like, we're going to dismantle the FBI, CIA Operation Northwoods, which was to take a civilian airliner and blow it up off the coast of Florida and blame it on Cuba, and then go invade Cuba. And he didn't want to do that. And apparently he went down the Federal Reserve too and get back on more to a gold standard. A couple weeks later, shot in the head, broad daylight. And they looked at it and went, one guy did that. Like, all right, well, there's 3 bullets here and 1 bullet hit there. No, actually that third bullet kind of just like hit 10 people at once. Don't worry about that. Yeah. And then the full bullet that was put on there, which is amazing. Sometime in the last couple of months, the FBI agent who found it, and he died. And on his deathbed, he was like, oh no, I found a full intact bullet that I put on the gurney with JFK's body because I thought they'd want that as evidence. Like, okay, maybe he did. You think you could have brought this up over the last 50 years at any point in time? You just never heard people going on about like, oh, we just found this completely intact bullet. And this guy's like, all the time at, Thanksgiving dinner. Uncle Johnny gonna tell that story again about the intact bullet he put on Kennedy's gurney. Like, here he goes again. But no one ever thought to say this until as he's dying. I'm like, that's bullshit, man. Like all this stuff is, but do people want to believe? Or do they just not care? And there's this whole, the law of karma. And so everything that's happening to us in the world, apparently, if there is this like new world order, if there is this, this committee of 300, these 300 families that, control everything and they kind of work together. And no matter whatever we do, we just kind of plod forward, and it's just like war and violence and all these things. But they kind of always tell us what's going to happen. And they could tell you maybe in a Hollywood movie, they could tell you in one of the, it was Rothschilds or King Charles's father was like, I'd like to come back as a disease and wipe out most of the population. I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, that's what your reincarnation fantasy is? Like, what, come back as a bird on DMT. What are you like?
Right?
That's a different choice, you know? But they
They're
sit here and they
talking
just
to
say
me,
this stuff.
man. They're
Yeah.
talking to me.
But they're allowed to do this because they say this to us, that The Simpsons, all this predictive programming, but it's put out there and then people don't object to it. And then afterwards you see it, but it's like, oh no, we told you. And like in the loosest of terms, and there's different theories on this. And, is that the world of karma? Is that just a karma law in the world? But like, how do they know about it? Or, some of these aliens on the moon, do they tell them about it? Like, hey, treat
Yeah.
those people any way you want, but as long as you tell them what they're doing, like there's no fault for you. And in the reincarnation cycle, you can work your way up.
I think one of the reasons why a lot of this stuff goes unchecked and not talked about, and my family reminds me, like when I bring this stuff up to them, they remind me that no matter what is quote unquote the right answer, it's not going to make a difference in my everyday life. I'm still going to get up. I'm still going to go to work. I still have to earn money for my family, put food on the table and a roof over our head, because that's the reality we live in. Alien being real isn't going to allow me to retire on the countryside and make sure my family always has food to eat and a place to live. So I get that idea that you're stuck in this gear, you're stuck grinding away because this is your reality, and your reality is to survive, right? Your reality is to thrive and to, raise a family so that they can also do the same thing. But I guess that would be my takeaway from this conversation. If anybody's listening and wants to take
They
anything away
turned
from
off
it,
a long
is
time ago. Don't worry.
yeah, they might have. But if they do, if they're still listening, if they take anything away, it's like, you know what? Just for a moment, take a step back and think about some of these things, some of these topics. If there's anything you've ever questioned, or if there's anything that you're ever like, why is that happening this way? Why? Think on it a little bit. Do a little bit of your own research. Have some fun with it, because that's really, that's going to keep us going. That's going to keep us, not just feeding into, I don't know, some kind of crazy conspiracy theories. It's not about that, but it's about not, you want to talk about bucking the system. It's kind of making sure you're still going against that grain. Like, you don't want to go with the with the grain. You want to go against it. You want to find out what is really true. I mean, like there's that idea of, the what is it, Plato's cave is where,
The
the
shadows on the
idea of
wall.
yeah, like the idea of reality, like you're fixed, you're chained to in this cave at this one wall in the cave, and there's a light being projected on this wall, and that's what you know is reality. But if you were to break away from those chains, you would see that that light is being projected from a source. And behind that source, or in front of that source, there's a whole puppet show going on. Well, who's controlling the puppets? Not to mention the fact that if you leave the cave, there's a whole other reality out there, right? So it's like, just to take a moment and think about that fact that there's different levels to everything. Because I think at the root of it, if you do, people of all walks of life can find more commonality, and I think that's my goal, is to find commonality with people that I've never met, people who live in a completely different society, completely different culture, to know that at the root of it all, we're still people, and I think that's what fascinates me about it.
Yeah, I love all these topics. I like you say, you still have a job to go to and everything. So it's kind of, talk about the Phillies earlier. So they went in '08 and it was great, but I still had to go to work the next day.
Yep.
So like as great as it was, like it wasn't my accomplishment, so I had a lot of fun with it. Now for the aliens coming on, if we get some like free energy and stuff, like, yeah, you still have to work, but now I just save $1,000 a month because I don't need electricity, I don't need gasoline, I don't need, and maybe we can also, hey, flights to Hawaii are so expensive. Like, oh, actually I can just disassociate from New Jersey and be in Hawaii in half a second. Like that stuff's interesting. I do think you should question, I agree with you, of these narratives. Like it was when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Like, all right, the government lies to you all the time. So believe them that they're liars. But
Yeah.
instead, you have all these people coming out like all the time, and they're like, oh no, like this is so great. Oh, my team's the best team. No, your team sucks. Like
Yep.
I support one team more than the other. That team sucks, man. Like I wish I didn't have to support any of them, But like, so don't get all too excited that like your team's in charge. because who's in charge is their donors. They're the massive PAC donors. Like it's not this grassroots Ron Paul thing. This, oh, we have the smallest individual $1 donors and we have $1 trillion. No. Big pharma gave them money.
Nope.
Big tobacco, big alcohol, big everybody. And then when it comes down to it, and they're like, oh, okay, are cigarettes good for a 9-month pregnant woman? Yeah, a pack a day is good. Doctor said so. And hey, 4 out of 5 dentists say to use fluoride and do this. And you just look at the stuff. It's a byproduct of aluminum and it's just waste, but they found a way to charge it. And hey, make sure you rub it on your kids' teeth. And I'm guilty of half of this when I take my kids to the dentist. And I'm staring at them and they're like, do we do the fluoride? And I'm like, on the phone with my wife, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I know the right answer, but I also it's hard to be brave in that moment. And some of the times I am, and other times I'm like, fuck, am I ruining my kid? Like, I don't have all the right answer for this. Like, what if I'm just stuck in a bad trip? There's this guy I interviewed, John Kerwin, super nice guy. And he wrote this book and it was a conspiracy theory, survival guide or something. Nice guy. But he was a full adult. He was 60 years old. And he at some point he realized the Federal Reserve was not federal. It was just a private company, stealing all our money. And I might think my cat wants to join in on stealing all our money. And then he went into 9/11. Then he got into flat earth. He's like, oh, this is true. He lost his whole family and they left him there. Dude, you're insane. No. So I was talking to him and I was like, man, I feel bad for you. But you don't need my pity, but I'm just telling you. I was like, I had a family of my dad. We talked about JFK. Then the movie came out. And half the time they could just be oh, Brian's just talking about the movie or whatever, or hey, aliens, E.T., Mac and me, all this stuff. I was like, why are you talking about that? You're going on to them at the dinner table, hey, high school daughters, don't you know the earth is flat? And maybe you should save that for them for another time and not jump in with both feet into the freezing cold water. You have to wade your way in. But this is some of the hard stuff out there. And, hey, is the earth flat? I don't know, but I know NASA lies those. So as you tell me the earth is flat and you show me some things of where it should disappear past the curvature, I'm like, well, maybe the earth's just bigger than they're telling us. I'm still not ready to jump on the earth is flat, but I'm they're fucking lying to us. So why wouldn't they?
I think that's a big, a big thing. I don't subscribe to, I believe that the earth is definitely not flat. I don't believe in the idea of the ice walls and the lands beyond the ice walls and all that stuff. But to your point is well, how much of the truth are we being told? You have to look into it. You have to kind of do your own, it's a cliche now, but do your own research. But no, it's not even about that. It's just like you said, kind of wade your way into the water, slowly but surely. Even just having this conversation tonight, I wanted to talk about a gajillion things and we only scratched the surface, not even.
That's why we have future episodes. Don't worry.
Yes. Dude, I am all about it. I'll come and talk about this stuff as much as you want. But no, just the idea of, just take it little by little, find something that interests you and just look into it a little bit. So many people, they'll spend all this time. I don't want to say waste their time because some of it is fascinating, like true crime. They'll listen to true crime podcasts about the same case over and over and over and over again. And it's all right, that's cool. You enjoy that. Well, now pick something else, pick a different topic. But, if you want to hear about true crime, why don't you go and look into why the president of the United States was killed in 1963? Because that is a true crime podcast episode everyone should listen to. It's just fascinating to me. And I think that's another thing that interests me is that I don't like being duped. And I feel like we're duped on a regular basis, one way or another, and it bothers me.
You're getting fed the shit sandwich, and you're told it's not shit, but it is, and that's the worst part.
Yeah. So it's
I'm a grown man. I've got a family. I'm feeding my kids. I'm doing you're telling me, oh no, inflation's not 10%. It's actually only 1%. I've been to the grocery store, man. That's not.
Yeah.
That's not 1%.
Yeah. So then if you look into it, so all right, so they're lying. Oh no, it's not inflation. Well, it is. Well, why is the inflation there? So, and that's when you kind of got to dig a little bit deeper. Is it inflated because the government said so, or is it inflated because these, like I talked about earlier, these corporations have so much leeway and power and so much weight they could throw around, they could literally price anything the way they want and make as much of a profit margin as they want with little to no regard to anyone else or to the economy for that matter, and the ebb and flow of what an economy should be. and that's why the prices are inflated. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Just dig a little deeper, look a little bit, and stop arguing with one another about who's right and who's wrong, because nobody's right and nobody's wrong. You know, there's levels to this, man.
You have to figure it out. When I had you guys all on, did I tell you about my buddy who I interviewed, Fossils from the Future? They had a blues paranormal band, and about the building that he went
No.
into. Did I tell you this? All right. So Jamie and Brenda from Fossils from the Future, they do paranormal blues. They have like this like Bigfoot song, and it's all cool shit. But so Jamie does this like marketing. I think he does marketing. So his buddies in Philadelphia, they're moving from one building to the other. So he goes over to help them move or something. And while they're there, they're like, like, hey man, you want to show Jamie the basement? Show him what's in the basement. And the guy's like, oh yeah, I'll come show him. Jamie like went down there. I'm like, dude, didn't you see like the Blair Witch Man? Like, don't go down there with them. Like, this is terrible. So he goes down the basement of this in Old City, and there's a storefront in the basement. There's windows. He said there's old shoes in there from like the 1800s under there. And there's this whole shop in there. He said, we didn't go in there, like the door was closed. He's like, but that was like in the basement. I was like, dude, that's crazy. Cause like one of the things like, in the last couple of years I've been interested in is this like mud flood type of thing. And like this Tartaria, like this world civilization, and then a cataclysm wiped them out. And there's a whole forest in the Pacific Northwest where a giant tsunami came across, Washington State, and you can see it's like buried and petrified. And yet that tsunami is not in like the record books, even though it happened relatively recently. So there's this storefront buried in Philadelphia, right? So what's that, like 15 feet, like under the ground?
Yeah.
So as I'm talking to him, I'm like, dude, but like, that's crazy, because you can go see Betsy Ross's house. You can go see, where the Continental Congress met. It's like, when did this happen? Because like, if this is, you're seeing shoes and this isn't, I don't know what George Washington wore, and if he had like the new Yeezys on, whatever he had, but like whatever he was wearing, I wouldn't be able to like, oh, that's a George Washington shoe. But if it's not falling apart and, Native Americans had moccasins or bare feet or something, and you're seeing these things, like it has to be from 1600 on, right? So it's like, where did 15 feet of earth fill in, and then if it's, oh, they excavated it, like, all right, well, let's get some thoughts here, because Philadelphia is kind of like this like marshland right next to the Delaware River. Had they had a hard time building on it for a long time. All right, where did they excavate 15 feet of dirt for that? And you have to assume now like most of the city then was excavated out. Like, would they bring this to Jersey? Would they bring this out to like the Valley Forge? Like, these are just like harder concepts to wrap your head around. So I need to follow up with him and see if he remembers the address. I need to get in there.
I want to go. You let me know.
Road
I
trip.
will go. I will go with you.
Yeah.
I would love to see that, just because I love the idea of seeing things that are stuck in time. I love going urban exploring. That's one of my biggest little, what do I call that? It's just something I like to do on all the spare time I have. No, yeah, I would do it in a second, man. Tell me where it is. I'll go.
Isn't that crazy though? So like, and just
Yes.
that's there. There's this guy who wrote a book of like this underground Philadelphia, but it's more about the tunnels. And I was trying to get him to come on. He's a professor. He's at Penn or Drexel or something there, but he emailed his professor address. He didn't get back. But like, so there is this underground part. I get that. I get, but like the trains weren't running in the 1700s. I guess not. I don't know. But then you hear these other things coming on, and the internet's great. Like, I'm talking to you through the internet. I find like all my guests, I'm reading all these books. Like Twitter, as terrible as Twitter is, and it's a doom scroll. Like, I just love the information that's on there. Some of the old stuff and the Tartaria, and there was this alien interview. Got just crazy stuff that's amazing. But then like pictures will come out, and you're like, well, that's not real. But like, that's like obviously not real. That's Jesus shaking George Washington's hand. Like, I don't think that happened. But people are like, oh my God, this just proves that George Washington's real, or oh, Jesus is real. Oh, and George Washington's riding a dinosaur. Like, just bullshit, right? But there'll be some pictures, and like, they're reliable sources in this area, in this realm. And it's places like San Francisco, as they're digging to put in the sewer line, and they're finding entire levels below with windows. And if you walk into the building and you get in the elevator, it says floor 1. Like, it doesn't say basement below it. It doesn't say like negative, so like they kind of seems like some of these people may have found old buildings that were here. And it's kind of, the hidden part of our history of like, who was here? Is this the Giants? You'll see some pictures of doors that are like 30 feet high, and then knockers like 15 feet high. And it's like, well, what the fuck, man? Like, you're gonna stand on my shoulders, I'm gonna stand on his shoulders, and we're gonna go up there and knock on the door. Like, it's crazy.
Like the Wizard of Oz type stuff.
Yeah. It's, but that stuff is like, it's just nuts to me that there's stuff out there like this. And it kind of just gets glossed over. And even in the Amazon, they found this entire civilization that was just
Oh, I
buried
know.
under, and but even with that, they're like, oh, it looks like they probably had 1 million people there. Okay, well, you guys just found, like, shouldn't this be like really exciting to you? You just found out that there's 1 million more people. You're like, oh, in Mexico there was only 10,000 people, and it was the Mayans that lived there. But you just found out there's 1 million more of them. Like, this should be crazy.
Right. It should be worldwide news, but we're just so, we're so stuck on the craziness of the sensational stuff.
Yeah, that's the
And
hard part. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. Do you have any hope for like this stuff coming out? Do you have any hope for like true alien disclosure? Like, it seemed like we started that way, and
oh
the
man,
brakes kind of.
yeah. So I don't know, man. I have my thoughts and my theories about like the different levels of what a UFO is and what that means for us as people. I don't know. I don't think no, we'll never know exactly what quote unquote they know. I don't think. I think they'll feed us little morsels as it's convenient for them to do. A guy like David Grush, whether or not he's reliable in and of itself is a mystery, but you have to like take the things that he says. If you take him at face value, like even he's now being silenced. So was he there as an operative, or was he telling the truth and now he's being silenced? Well, either way, he's not talking. So are they trying to change the narrative? Like there's so many questions. I feel like every time something like this happens where like there's this milestone thing where we seem like we're a step closer, it just creates so many more questions. And yeah, I don't know. I'd love to talk about like the different stories of and the different types of UFO. The idea that there's like UFO stories of craft out there that has almost like skin or scales or like a
That's like alive.
consciousness. Yeah, or has like a consciousness in and of itself, right? That this craft that we know it to be is like that. Or like the different types of beings that there could be. Did you ever dive into the Virginia stuff?
I watched
Like,
James Fox's documentary
yeah,
on that. So real quick
yeah.
for Grush though. So with Grush, when he came out, I'm like, oh, we finally got the whistleblower. And then he's testifying. He's like, oh, I have permission to say all this stuff. Like, I ran past these statements. And then when you're hearing him say, I mean, like, in our world, like, it was kind of known or whatever, but it's all like through stories. But you're like, if you're a regular person hearing this, you're like, dude, this is fucking nuts. But that was approved to say. And so this is what kind of like leads me to think that he's like an op, because you sign up, you sign these NDAs, you have this business, you have this job that you want to retire at the Pentagon, and they're like, hey, David, come on in, sit down. Hey, your new job is you're going to go in front of. I don't want to do that. Well, actually, your contract says you're going to. I'm going to tell my family I don't want to do this. This NDA, this, like, we could kill you on it. Like, there's things there if you're going to sit here and rat on us for this, or just go out there and do this, and now you're silenced and you can't talk anymore. Or was that part of your op? And I just find that, like, he was supposed to have this opinion piece, this op-ed that was supposed to come out in February, and he was going to
Mhm.
reveal some more things and kind of like force their hand on more disclosure. Now, I don't know the pressure. This is all real. This has to be insane. If he's like a real person who's truly whistleblowing, and he's getting pressure from his family, he's getting pressure from the government, he's getting pressure from random people. Hey, we're going to kill you. Like, that has to be a lot on your shoulders. So I could understand going into hiding. I just find that what he was allowed to say, I just find fascinating, like unbelievable, like, fantastic.
Mhm. Yeah, I did like the word that he chose too, biologics. Like what is. He very specifically said that word. He didn't say beings, he didn't say bodies, he didn't say, you know, anything. He said the word biologics. That could mean so many things. It could be living tissue, it could be, botanic in nature, it could be like some kind of plant-based thing that they found or
A banana peel from
um,
the alien. They're like, oh,
you
alien
know,
banana peel.
I think about that and you think about like, we talked about like little seeds being planted in movies and stuff, but like think about that, like that movie Wally, right? They had like this little probe that found a seedling, right? And they had to take it, through space to get it to a different place to analyze it. So it makes you wonder, is like, okay, well, were these probes that collected samples from our Earth and were taking it back, or were they samples from elsewhere that were taking it here? That could mean biologics. Biologics can mean so many different things, you know?
I'll get to the Brazilians in a second, but I always find it interesting whenever like the army, so there was the Chinese spy balloon flew across Wisconsin, then all the way across, they couldn't do anything. And then a couple weeks later, there was three more, an incident of three more things close to that nature. And they're, well, it wasn't spy balloons, but don't worry. And we actually shot the one down in Alaska, and then one was in Canada, and we shot two Sidewinder missiles at it. Okay. Oh, it was a Hobby Lobby balloon. Don't worry. After we did that, like, okay, so some kid's $200 balloon cost $800,000 of missiles to shoot down. Just kind of sounds like bullshit.
Right.
But if this is aliens and you're shooting shit at it, like maybe we should like think first before we start doing this. Because if we live long enough, we don't blow up the planet and we get smarter and we start going to different worlds, like we're not sending the peacekeepers, we're not sending like the chaplains, we're not sending, the sisters of the poor there to go convert them. It's going to be the top end military unit, some scientist, maybe a chaplain or somebody to, find their faith. But they're not the first people getting off. As our ship lands, we're gonna be guns blazing and we'll ask questions later. So you keep like
Yeah.
shooting at these ships and kind of hope, you're like, oh, we must shot one down. Like, can we just think a little more? Can that be a consensus? Like, I might not agree with everything like this New World Order or the UN thing, but maybe could we put that forward to discuss? Like, hey, what are we doing about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that gives you the way that you can kind of start thinking about these topics is pretend for a minute. You suspend your disbelief and pretend that these things that they're shooting at are UFOs in the sense that they are alien beings or alien craft. You have to ask those questions. Well, why are they, why would they instigate something like that with something that's technologically more advanced than we are? There's got to be a reason behind it. And when you start asking those questions that might seem insane, you might start finding out, real truth about the people who are doing these things. There's a quote in a movie. Man, you got to watch what you say nowadays because you can just get canceled. But Chris Tucker said it in Rush Hour too. If you want to find out, you want to get to the bottom of it, you got to follow the rich white man. Right? That's his quote from the movie. So don't get at me, internet. It's a real part of the movie, but it's the truth though. Like maybe the man is Caucasian and maybe he's not, but you follow the money, right? You follow the money and what the motivation is, power dynamic wise around these decisions that are made that they can't cover up. The fact that something was shot down. Well, what was the thing? Well, we don't know, but why was it done? What was the financial motivation behind it? That's generally 99% of the time you can start finding some truths there.
I think we follow the money for a lot of things. You can solve a lot of the world's problems as it goes back.
Mm-hmm.
You see where it goes. But a black budget, you find things like this. So this Vashina incident, I watched the documentary by James Fox. It seems pretty true, man. It seems that an alien spaceship like landed, right? And there was like 20 school kids, and like some other people saw them, and then it crashed, and then the police were after it. And this police officer was carrying a little alien body and took it to a hospital. And that police officer got super sick, and I think he died of cancer like in like no time at all. Went from like completely
Yes.
healthy and a young healthy man to dead
Yeah, he was in
within
his young
weeks.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah. And they take the being to the hospital, and like some of those doctors I think had problems too. You hear this stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think. It kind of seems, I just have like, it's like the movie The Predator. He had these long claws, these long fingers, and like doesn't look like it'd be good to like build a ship. And then you see a ship, but then you're like, well, how did you get the screwdriver to go in like do that? And you see these little alien things, but like it just gets me like, not that like our fingers are the best for everything, but like looking at it and like, what would this little tiny being, how like what ladder did it design? Like, what does it have to fix things to go do this? And maybe I'm just thinking of it wrong and assuming everything is like our size. But to see them accomplish this, galaxy travel, I'd find that incident super interesting. I just wish there was more disclosure. The sad thing with all this stuff though is it happens in another country. It just doesn't get the credence that like it has to happen in the United States. It has to happen to Americans. It has to happen to English speaking people, or otherwise those people are too dumb to fully understand what happened and tell us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the tropes that really bugs the shit out of me. it's that is that is colonizer mentality, if there ever was colonizer mentality, right? Is the fact that they are lesser because they are not from here. Yeah, that bugs
But
me.
so why? But if the Greeks and the Romans were so smart, and we look at them and through history, and they were so educated and they were so elevated, and you know, I guess are they Caucasian at that? Are they? I don't know. I mean, but like Italians at that point were probably a little darker, and the Greeks are
Oh
relatively
yeah,
dark people.
I get
You know,
nice
this
and
isn't
dark in the summer.
right, right. But we look at them and they're so brilliant, you know, and then the English, the Irish, like not looked upon as fondly or, you know, whatever it might be. And the Spanish, that's not, you know, that's not completely Caucasian, but like they are more educated. I would not that, you know, the English aren't looked upon fondly, but it's not like they're great philosophers they look at, and it might be a couple, but it's not the Greeks and the Romans. But then we get over here and it's the South Americans, or is Africa, the continent, you know, from Egypt and below. It like gets worse and worse as you go down, you know, for the opinions of these people. Like, why? Yeah, I just don't understand. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand that mentality at all. I mean, there's there's so much wisdom and knowledge in every corner of every type of culture and society. And that's what, like, one of the things I was talking about earlier. Like, if we just took a minute to step back from our day to day, you know, what we have to do to survive, maybe put ourselves in the shoes of what others have to do to survive in their culture and their society, we would see that there's so much commonality, you know, that we all just want the best for our kids. We want the best for the people who are tasked to protect us in our village, whether that means doctors or leaders or whatever the case may be, or teachers. You know, I think we would find that we are all very similar in that way. And I wish that we would all just dig a little deeper, whether it's about the aliens that crash landed in Brazil, or just about, you know, the shit that's going on in our own towns. You know.
So there was right at the time of the lockdowns. This was March of 2020. There was a Twitter story that I think it would have gained a ton more traction if it wasn't like that point in our history. And I had this guy come on, went by Duke Mills, and he recounted the story. And it was in Mage, Brazil, Mage, Brazil. And there was footage of a UFO in the sky. And it was in, you know, the city, you know, it's a built up city. This isn't just like some little rural town. So you were able to see different videos uploaded to like triangulate like where people were, and you could see at different parts of the city, they're all looking the same thing. So for this to be you know, a goof, a skit, you know, a flash mob, like it would have taken a ton. Like it just seems like the coordination would have been unsustainable, except for like a huge Hollywood budget. So you're seeing all of these things, and then people, you start going up and it was blue and you could really see it, but I think there was a thunderstorm. And so the thing crashed, and then it crashed right near a military base. And then people were picking up the military broadcasting of like, stay in, stay this up. The police like closed off all the roads around there. But there was gunfire then within the woods of this wilderness. And apparently some of the beings escaped. And this was coming across the broadcast. And there was a leaked picture of the crashed UFO as it was like half in the ground.
Huh.
And there was a Google Maps at that point where you could have went in and saw this like hole in the jungle of, so it was like almost like in the Predator. Hey, it crashed in South America,
Yeah.
in here, and you know, here we go. But like this hole in the canopy, the tree canopy of like where it crashed. So like, I think that was fascinating at that time, but then that was early March, like middle March, and then like things just got worse for the next, you know,
Just
3 or
got
4 months
buried.
until
News cycle. Mage, as you said, it's is the name of it.
Mage. I don't know how to pronounce it. Mage. I kept calling it Mage.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
have to look at that because I've never heard that account, but that sounds insanely fascinating. It almost reminds me of the face peeler stuff that's going around, or that was going around a couple months ago. Did
In
you hear
Peru,
anything
right?
about? Yeah. Now I have my own idea of what that is. I think that's more or less the cartel that was given military grade weapons and using it to terrorize the villagers. That said, yeah, there's just, like I said, there's levels to the story, and I'd be interested in learning more about this incident to see just the evidence that came out about it.
There's a link in the show notes. I feel like it was like one of my first 10 episodes or something. There's a link in the show notes, and I think it links to a Reddit or something that has it all broken down to this guy's Twitter long form that he broke down for it. Really interesting stuff. And I don't think I heard it on any podcast, but it was just as as the lockdowns were starting. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, this is gonna be great. And then it was, everything turned into something else.
If it's nowhere else on any other podcast, we owe the world to make an episode just about that.
Just put it out there. Put it out there. So this guy they interviewed, he was abducted by aliens, and he started seeing them when he was like 10 years old. And I've heard this since I've talked to him, but at that time, I've never heard this at all. He would get abducted in the astral realm. He said he would walk around with his buddy, like at the mall, and get like narcolepsy. He's like, dude, I gotta sit down and sleep for like 10 minutes. And like that, they're like walking past Sam Goody or whatever, and he would crash on a bench, and the aliens would abduct him right then as soon as he went to sleep. And I was like, hey, well, like, hey, I'm here for people's truth and the story you want to tell. I'm not here to tell you what you're saying isn't
Right.
totally everything I believe in. And so he said it, and I let him. Yeah, okay, great, great, great. And he's a nice guy. He served in the military. Had some issues he overcame, and all this great stuff. And then after that, I've heard several podcasts of people talking about things of this nature. This is fascinating.
Like being abducted in the astral realm. That's crazy.
Yeah,
It's like a crazy notion, but I would love to learn more about it. Yeah, I've never heard of that either. This is one of your episodes. What, one of your earlier episodes you said?
Yeah, Duke Mills is his name. Yeah, but I just
know
find
what
all
I'm
this
listening to on the way to work tomorrow.
You're set, man. But I just find all like they start talking about like other dimensions and things like that, and then as I said earlier, this whole fourth dimension. What does that mean? But is it the consciousness dimension? Like that's just me assuming that when they say dimensions, that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or we're supposed to be up to 11 or 13 now or something. But nobody said it was a physical dimension.
Right.
They could be from the dream. That's like Freddy Krueger stuff. They're in the dream world and they're projecting themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get the law of karma. They made Freddy Krueger and told you that things in your dreams are going to come out and hurt you. And they're like, hey man, we told you. I can't believe you fell for that one. So what do you think is we're gonna wrap up here in a minute, and we're definitely coming back and doing more. What do you think is one of the episode 11 Duke Mills?
Okay.
That's what it is. Do you have like a more out there belief that you think is like what's one crazier? Like so there's like mud flood type of thing.
One of my
9/11. You have any thoughts on 9/11?
Oh, I
You're
have
not there
thoughts on 9/11.
for that?
I have thoughts on 9/11.
Okay.
No, one of my crazier beliefs would be that there have been civilizations that lived on this planet as early as just a couple, maybe a dozen or so millennia ago that were just as, if not more technologically advanced than as we are. And that mainstream academia is doing everything they can to stop that from coming out for whatever reason. And I have, again, opinions on why that reason is, but that's probably my craziest thing.
All right. So Michael Cremo, I think he Cremo, it's his name.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was on Rogan at one point, but he wrote a book, Forgotten Archaeology or Forbidden Archaeology, and this is when they would find like threaded bolts in a 1,000,000-year-old piece of coal. And then they're like, as they would break the coal up, like, oh, that bolt was just on the person. And as they broke it, it fell off of them. And then, or they'll find little things that kind of look like computer chips or whatever it might be, and in places they're not supposed to. So I completely agree with you. I think there have been many civilizations that have lived here that we're completely unaware of.
Yep.
We talked about growing up in a Christian household and, a Catholic household. And I never put much thought into like the Bible being like true. I thought it was always a lot of parables and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you get into like creationism, and I was like, that's fucking dumb. Like Darwin did all this stuff. And again, as I've already proven, I'm not a scientist here. I do have a hard time of just evolution in general. And I brought up to somebody on one of my episodes, like, oh, that's not how it works. I'm like, all right, but like, where's the ooze that has one little baby leg on it? Like, where is that now? Like, where is the monkey that's going into the early humans? Like, where is that? We just don't have any of that in our current record of anything. He's like, oh, that's not how evolution works. Like, well, okay. Like at some point, isn't something evolving a little bit? Wouldn't we find this fish that can, I know there is a fish that can walk on land for like 30 feet and jump back in or whatever it is, but like,
Right.
where is that fish that also maybe it's not a fish, the bird that has gills, like where is that?
Right.
I just
No, I
find that
agree.
hard. I find that hard to square. And then fossils of things, I think it's interesting that dinosaurs weren't found until like P.T. Barnum was like the first to find them. Then he starts up this whole thing, and then you find out that all the fossils on display are actually all made of plaster, and then they come out of this like one China factory, and all the real bones are so sensitive that are locked up in the basement, and they can't show you the real T-Rex bone. But then also you'll see that some guy was missing for 4 weeks in the jungle, and he comes out and he's completely rock solid concrete. You're like, well, how the hell did he get petrified, man? Like that seems kind of crazy. Like it's not a Sopranos character, right? He didn't cross the mob, bro. This isn't Jimmy Hoffa. This is just some dude doing El Camino and like crashing the Florida Everglades, and now he's completely fossilized in 4 weeks. Like to me, that also seems kind of crazy. And at the same time, it goes against me thinking that people have been alive for millions of years. Because then, if like a dinosaur fossil was true or is true, whatever it might be, maybe they were fossilized a lot faster. Like so, that's
Yeah.
just kind of like or we just go through these cycles of like maybe there's 8 billion people today, and next year we're down to 5,000, and then dinosaurs take over again, and we're hiding in caves, and then they die off, and we come back up, and there's these cycles of this. I
Yeah.
have a hard time with all of it because once you're lied to, once you know you're lied to, and you look back on everything, and you're like, well, fuck this noise.
Well, yeah. What else? What
Yeah,
else?
I love it. It seems like your daughters are around the same age as my children. So my son was fourth grade, and he came home. He's, hey, Dad, discovered America. And I stop and think, and it's like part of it is like all the stuff I know now, and it's also like okay, like all the stuff I know now, where society, or internet society is, or whatever for things, and
Right.
I'm like, all right, are we still saying Columbus did this, or is this like like the Vikings? Are we doing like the Newfoundland and Eric the Red kind of doing this stuff? So I just stared at him for like a minute, like he must have like I had like this Mitch McConnell like brain freeze, and just like like unpause, and I'm like and I was like, the Native Americans. I'm not even sure we're allowed to say that. I'm like, the Native Americans. He's like, Christopher Columbus. Like, I was a moron. I was like, oh, I didn't know. Like, I don't know when you fix these errors of like when that's not true anymore.
It's like I knew that in 1994, but it's 2024 now. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's the right answer.
Right. But it's like been disproven. It's also like societally unacceptable to say that he even did it. But like,
Yep.
it's been disproven that he even did it anymore. Like he's just,
Yep.
he's I don't even know. You would say, it's just tough.
Maybe
You're lied
maybe
to.
they got a hold of an old textbook at a school. Who knows?
I don't know. Yeah. That's, hey man, you never know. You never know. Vinny, I hope you didn't hate this episode. I hope you want to
Dude,
come back.
I had a blast, man.
Yeah.
This was so
This
much
is
fun.
barely the surface of scratching anything.
Yes.
I'll try to have a more focused direction next time. Maybe I'll send you some topics.
No,
and you
this
can
is
just go through those.
but this is good though. This is like, kind of like cracking the egg a little bit. And, maybe over the next couple conversations, we'll let some of that yolk come out,
Yeah, that's what we're going to go for. All right. Jersey Calling. What do you have coming up in July and going forward?
Oh, man. Now we got to talk about music. What do we have coming up? Well, we're recording a couple of songs with Pete Steinkopf from the Bouncing Souls later this week. That's pretty fun. And really, we're just, the train is running to September at the MMRBQ in Camden, New Jersey. For if you're a listener of radio, you can tune in to WMMR, which is 93.3 on the FM dials here in Philly, or you can stream it online. But we're playing their big festival called the MMRBQ, September 21st, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe
And
so. I will be storming the stage.
Yes, no, you will, because you said you had lawn seats. And I want to just remind folks that if you have general admission seats, you are allowed to come to the pit. You could sit underneath, whatever they're calling it. I could still call it the Tweeter Center, but whatever it's called nowadays, a Freedom Mortgage Pavilion. You could sit in the front row if you have a general admission ticket during our set. So please come do that.
Awesome. We'll all be out there. We're storming it. We're getting this done, and we're going to chant some like alien stuff until like you acknowledge that
Hell
aliens are real on
yeah.
stage.
I might get like an alien blow up doll with a guitar on it, and just we'll pass it around or something.
They have
Put a
the
Jersey
Halloween
Calling
costume
t-shirt on it.
where like the aliens
Yeah.
abducting the guy. All right, that's what you can do is you play on everything. You can work on this,
Exactly,
man. Yeah. Dude, I
Yeah, so-
appreciate it. Open invite. Let's get this going again.
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you. I appreciate you so much, man.
All right. I'll talk to you, dude. Have a good
All
one.
right. Later.
Take care.
You too.
Bye. All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guest. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.